Before Jesus, I was making some very, very poor decisions and doing a lot of partying, and that resulted in me doing a lot of drugs. And by the time I was about 25 years old, I was like a hardcore drug addict, and I also had absolutely no idea how to tell the truth anymore. Because when I was a drug addict, I was still able to function. I was able to have a job. I had relationships with people still, sort of, in the way that I was, able to like keep appointments and go golfing with my friends. But anytime they asked me questions about my personal life or anything like that, or where I was, it was always a lie. And I never knew how to tell the truth. It got to the point where I felt so lost. I couldn't tell the truth anymore. And I knew that if I continued going the way I was going to go, I was probably going to end up, dead or in jail or someplace really where I didn't want to be. So I agreed to go to rehab. And it was in rehab that I met Jesus. And I realized that I didn't just want to take a break from doing drugs. I realized that I wanted to change my life. And I knew that I couldn't do it by myself. And I didn't ask God, like I prayed, I didn't ask him to help me to stop doing drugs, because that wasn't the thing that I identified as the problem. I asked him to help me stop lying. Literally in that moment, I felt forgiven. I felt like I was, like a light was shining on me that wasn't shining on me before, and everything became more clear. And I stopped lying. I started telling the truth about everything, which really sucked at first, but at the same time, every time I would do it, I'd feel a little bit better. And I think that's what saved me, was Jesus being there and just allowing me to do that. When I got baptized 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had absolutely no idea what I was going to say before the congregation. But I had a lot of faith in knowing that Christ was going to help me kind of figure it out. And he did. Like 3 or 4 days before it happened, I just sat down, started writing, and he guided me through it. And he really put it on my heart to be honest about where I was. So that would probably be the first time that in front of thousands of people, I kind of admitted my past. So I realized that, like, in order to move forward, you have to be able to be okay with your past, because your past forms who you are. I had to go through the stuff I had to go through to become the person that I am. No matter what, my plan's to press on. No matter what, when resistance is met, not to turtle, but to turn towards God and ask for help. Because pretty much any time I've been able to do that up to this point, help's been given. After the baptism, I felt so much better again. It was like another kind of step in the journey of moving forward. Don't run away. If you're plagued by your past, there's no point in running away from it. It's like a fear. You need to face it, be okay with it. Allow Jesus to use it as a tool to help others. I think that's the reason why I'm sitting here right now.
And if that didn't get your heart rate up, you're in the wrong business. You should be at some other conference on how to make $1 million next year or something else. But that gets my heart going, and that has got my heart going for decades. That kind of a story. How many Canadians are there out there whom it may not be drugs and lying, it may be something else, it may be the inability to sustain any functional relationship, it may be their out of control, impurity, maybe their ego, their absolutely decimated self-identity that causes them to act out and behave in all kinds of weird ways. But whatever those other particulars are, it's this story that somebody comes and upon meeting Jesus finds that absolutely turns the tide of all of those debilitating and destructive things around, and that they're able to now live life to the full, like Jesus said. So that gets my heart going. It's just good to see you all here. We're in the midst of something really fun. Something hard, I mean that, but we're in the midst of something really fun right now. And I don't know where it's going to end, totally. But like, I'm not a youth pastor. I'm not in my early mid-20s. I'm not looking to make a name for myself in ministry. I just find what's beginning to happen here is just flat out exciting. And I'm seeing it in my team, my tribe, my denom, the AOC, and there's lots of good Christianity beyond our denom, absolutely. But this is my team. This is the team I play for. And so I see something. I see the cloud the size of a man's hand. And it's going to rain. And I'm just excited to be able to be on board with all you young people at the time when this is going to happen. So, what I felt last June when we were talking about this event, I felt we needed to talk about theme of more than me, and I'll explain that because I think it may at first blush not appear to make sense, but I hope it will by the time we're done. So first we need to retrace some things and begin with perpetuating why. Philippians, we read, "For it is God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose." Jesus said, "I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." So why should we worry about perpetuating why? Because Jesus will build his church. If our denom, or if me and my ministry assignment, if we flounder before the finish line, God will reach the world. He will raise up another denom. He will bring in another leader into the venue where I've given up on, and he will accomplish his will and purpose. Because he'll build his church. We don't build his church. We get to hang around and hang on and work and give our best, but none of us is adequate to the task. We can't build the church. Jesus builds the church, and he will build it. So why would we talk about perpetuating why? And Brady nailed it when he said most organizations lack the competitive stamina to follow through. And that's why Revelation 1-7, you see the Lord of the church going around and going, and with sadness, he had to blow out some candles. Now, that wasn't the end of the church. And he birthed and built up more churches that went on to reach Europe and then China, continued through Africa, down into Asia, across the ocean, to North and South America. But most organizations lack the competitive stamina to follow through. And that's what I'm hoping and praying that they're not going to be able to say about us. Brady says about their games, and of course he's a bit famous because of the last weekend again. But he says, we don't take Monday off because we're getting ready for Sunday. They just played on Sunday. Said, we're back in the gym at 6 a.m. because we're getting ready for next Sunday. And that just sounds strangely familiar to me. There was no ministry highlight, no great achievement, no number of souls saved, no accomplishment where I was able to say, Gary, take a few years off. You've earned it. Church has grown. We've seen fruitfulness. I said, no. We got a game on Sunday. We can't take Monday off. Not that you don't ever take a day off, but you know what I mean, from the mission. You don't take Monday off from the mission. Yeah, you can take a holiday, you can do whatever. But Sunday's game day. Try and catch where my heart is coming from a bit more. You remember when Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 went down and you saw on the news, as I saw, people like in this scene just putting their arms around each other and crying because Dad was on that plane. My daughter was on that plane. My cousins, the lady I worked next to in the office was on that plane. And it went down, we know it went down, and they can't even find it. And they were just sobbing unashamedly on international TV. because of the grief of the people who went down. Even more grief and more angry were the responses of the flight that left from Amsterdam and was headed to Kuala Lumpur. And over the eastern Ukraine, people with Russian intelligence and Russian missiles shot it out of the air. And 228 people died and 15 crew members. And again, my grandfather was on that plane. We were sending our daughter to university on that plane. My best friend was on that plane. My fiance was on that plane. And they're dead. And I'm inconsolable. Why? The greatest airline disaster of all time was on the Canary Islands in Tenerife Airport when a KLM jumbo jet and a Pan Am jumbo jet collided. The KLM jet was taken off, as you see in the picture, and the Pan Am jet turned just before it cleared ground enough, and it cut across and cut through the belly of that plane. And 583 people died. And the world's headlines were seized by the abysmal tragedy of what had happened. 583 people dead in one morning. Again, people are inconsolable. People, they can't be comforted because of the love and the concern for what was going on. And even the world who didn't know anybody on that plane just looked at it and they saw the pictures and they saw the headlines and they said, that's awful. That is terrible. So, what would the headlines be for this? 132 jumbo jets, 132, not one, not two, each filled with 500 people, crash into the ocean, and 158,857 people are dead tomorrow. Can you imagine the news waves if that happened? When one plane is shot down over the Ukraine, people are aghast. If 158,857 people were dead in 24 hours tomorrow, what would the UN, what would the aviation board, what would the news media, what would governments say, what would presidents and prime ministers tweet in response to that? Well, you see, 2,750 people die every hour and go into eternity because that's the death rate on planet Earth every day. Now, I know it's not a plane crash, it's not, but it's somebody's grandmother, somebody's son, it's somebody's fiance, it's somebody's basketball team. It's people who go into eternity. And for folk who believe what you and I believe, that we're ever living, never dying souls, and that when 158,000 people go into eternity, that they're headed somewhere. They're either prepared for that eternity or they're absolutely caught, unassembled, unprepared. And there's no recourse. And that's the why of the Christian church. When Jesus came, I said, I came that you might have life and you might have it more abundantly. That we could offer an option that is comforting to the one who's standing beside an open grave, to the person who gets a phone call at 1:38 in the morning and says, as the RCMP, I am so sorry to have to tell you. And that's shocking and terrible. But that as a person comes to terms with that death, to know that we raised that little boy in Sunday school and he married a Christian girl, and though he left behind 2 kids, he loved God and he knew where he was going and he had committed his life to Christ, like that guy that we saw up there that was doing drugs and lying his way into relational explosion and a personal demolition. but that he knew Jesus, and I know that he was ready for eternity. The death rate is still 1 out of 1. Everybody you know is going to go someday, and they'll either be prepared or they won't. See, the thing about that 158,000, 66,000 of them we know came from countries that have no gospel witness or people groups. And another huge chunk of those are from places like Canada, where we have no idea whether they were invited to an alpha group or whether a friend invited them over and said, you guys are struggling in your marriage. What's pulled us through is being our faith. I don't want to be overbearing, but would you happen to be interested in going to church with us sometime? We know you're in the last strokes of whether or not to bail out in your marriage. I think faith could help you. We don't know how many of those other 70,000 people ever had any exposure to the gospel in a meaningful way with a credible witness that could have prepared them that when they go down on the plane, whether it's the heart that and down they go, but that they know they're going to meet their Lord like this guy did. That's why we do church. That's the why. That perpetuates the why for me. I don't care if the churches are big, or they're fancy, they're rural, they're urban, whether they're multicultural or monolithic culturally or whatever. As long as they're consistently seeing souls come to Christ and to know Jesus of every stripe and type in the world and in our nation and in our city, that is stunningly fulfilling to me about what we do. So 20 months ago, I was elected into this office, and I began to flog something. I began to flog something that said, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Not good enough to say that Canadian universities are so academically and logistically aligned to oppose everything sincerely Christian, that we should not hope to reach any people on university campuses anymore, Kelly. That people in Canada are so in love with pleasure. They are so turned off by the scandals of church and the allegations against hypocrisy and insincerity that nobody wants to listen to the gospel anymore. You can't reach people in Montreal anymore. In Drumheller, where people, some of them have it good, they've got retirement money, they're more prepared for retirement than for eternity, and they think they've got years to live, and they're just living for pleasure, and they're not interested in your appeals to fall into the ground and die, like the gospel says, the person who loses their life for my sake will find it. There's such a resistance to that type, that stereotypical, old, historic gospel thinking. You can no longer reach people in Canada. It can't be done. It was able to be done in the 1920s and 30s and 50s even, maybe even the 60s. But from 2000 on, you can't reach people anymore with the gospel in Canada. Maybe the southern states, maybe in third world countries, maybe where people are less educated, but it doesn't work here anymore. And that's why we're plateaued. It's just too hard now. The results are so thin that the death rate offsets our conversion rate, and so we're plateaued. In fact, in some cases, we're trending into decline. You can't see churches grow in Canada anymore. I'm sorry to tell you, you went to Bible school for nothing, Lauren, because it doesn't work here anymore. And I started flogging something, say, that's a lie. That's not true. Gospel works now. Gospel uses pastors still. Jesus still calls young people into ministry and deploys them in Canada and around the world because there's still a harvest being reaped. If it was reaped already, we'd be going up in the rapture. If that makes it through your soffit interpretation, I'm not sure. But whatever. If it was over, we'd be done. He'd be calling us home. But it's not over. The church is here because the gospel still the power of God unto salvation to everyone who believes. That's why we're here. It works in rural Alberta. Works in the inner city Calgary. Works at the Dream Center. People who've had drugs and have criminal charges laid against them. And the judge says, you go there or you go to jail. The gospel works at the Dream Center. Works in the Northwest Territories. Works with Indigenous people. Les told us this week he was drinking for 20 years. But he's not drinking anymore. He's saved. He's part of the backbone of the Dene Church in Hay River. Gospel works for Les. He's Indigenous. Don't tell me nobody can get saved anymore. We just have to hold our own. We have to pray, just keep maintaining the church and hold on to the biological growth and the few families that are still with you and pray that Jesus comes back in time before it all implodes. And I've been flogging something for 20 months saying, don't believe that. You believe God can grow your church in Edmonton. You believe God can reach people in the town where you live and preach Jesus unashamedly. Of course, you want to be contextually appropriate. You want to be wise as serpents, harmless as a dove, be creative, be innovative, be technologically savvy. Do it the best you can. Do it with excellence. But don't stop believing in the gospel in this hour, because it still works. Say it's hard. There's not enough money. And who likes being mocked? Who likes being thought to be an embarrassment in the light of changing cultural views on alternative lifestyles, and you're thought to be filled with hate and portrayed as someone who's an albatross or a dinosaur? Who likes that? Who likes being painted that way in the media? Now, nobody does. It's hard. It's hard to grow a church. Anything that's good is uphill, folks. Anything that's good is uphill. It's hard to do a lot of things. It's hard to grow a church. I give you that. I know that. I never escaped the pressure of next when I was pastoring. We'd get through one thing, but the next thing. And I thought, how can I lead it? How can I pay for it? How can I cast vision for it? How are we ever going to get this done? Where will we get the help from? It was always hard. See, in Navy SEAL training, in Hell Week, there's always a brass bell that goes with the candidates. Whether they're on the 10-mile runs or the 5-hour swims, whether they're carrying beams as a team around and around and around the drill field, whether they're sitting in the cold waters on the ocean shore, up to their chest in the sand with the waves hammering on them for 15 hours and they can't get out. He's got to sit there. And the drill sergeants are just scorching them with criticism and mocking them and telling them to give up and quit. They were never any good anyway. What are you doing here? Go home to your mama. And they just hammer on them all week long. And everywhere they go, there's the brass bell. They set it up on the marching fields. They set it up where they climb the nets. They set it up on the shore where they sit in the cold water till they've got hypothermia. Everywhere they go, there's the brass bell. And you know what? You can get out of any one of those drills by just walking over. And you grab the cord and you ring the brass bell, which says, I give up. And you can walk out of there, and the Marines will never make you do anything again. All you got to do is ring the brass bell. See, there's a book in the Bible about the brass bell. It's called the Book of Jonah. And it's there for time immemorial. For people who believe in God and who read the Bible. There's one book in there to tell you about the brass bell. And it says you can quit anytime you want. God called you to Nineveh, but you don't have to go. Jonah looked at it and he said, those people are getting just what they deserve. They're a bunch of irreligious, irrelevant, pagan, carnal living, unbelieving sinister, cynical sinners. And they're getting the judgment they deserve. Furthermore, if I go, the cost, the risk, the ridicule, whatever, is too hard. And Jonah walks over and he rings the brass bell. He says, I'm gone. He goes down to the wharf and he buys a ticket. Now, Billy Graham, I'm quoting him, he says, the most expensive ticket you can ever purchase is the ticket you buy to escape the will of God. Get me out of here. I want off. This is too hard. This is too discouraging. I want out. Whatever ticket you buy, by air, plane, or automobile, or just on foot, to walk away from the will of God is the most expensive purchase you can ever make for any trip you'll ever take. And that's what the book of Jonah tells us. And I don't know. I think you're of the same company, but I don't want to be saying, God, Canadians are getting what they deserve. They've dishonored your name. They're sinners. They're despicable. They're not deserving of your grace. And they're hard-hearted. You can't reach them anyway. I'm out of here. Gospel doesn't work anymore in Canada. Let's go. There's a wrong choice and a right choice you can make. Now I want to tell you, there are difficult places in Alberta, but I want to say one of the most difficult places you could ever serve in Alberta is in Drumheller. That people don't get saved there. It's unbelieving, self-filled kind of a place. I got an email yesterday from Craig Randall. I don't know what to do with my theology, because he says in the last 2 weeks, he said 8 people have got saved in Drumheller. And there's churches around this province that have balloons on their platforms, some every Sunday, some every month, to honor new births into the kingdom. I'm going to have to change my theology, because I don't think the argument that the gospel doesn't work anymore in Alberta, I don't think it stands up. There's just too many churches that are growing, and people that are faithfully proclaiming and working hard and getting beat and getting discouraged, and some things don't work, and sometimes there's not enough money, and it just hard. But I want to tell you, 8 people got saved in Drumheller in the last 2 Sundays. But now here's the confusing part, is that that's not what I'm here to talk about tonight. I want to wrap up with more than me. And why I said to Jeremiah, this is what we need to talk about, is that, see, we're in the midst of a turnaround. We're seeing more and more churches start to prevail. And I don't say that to discourage anybody who's right now still flatlined or declining. It's just not morning yet where you're at. And don't give up in the middle of the night. There's no nighttime that has ever succeeded against a sunrise. And so where you're at in hard times, and it's difficult for you now, I'm not trying to discourage you. The others are growing, you're not. The sun's going to rise there if you will not faint. But lest we just think that if I can get my church growing, we just go to heaven right now. That's all I ever wanted. That's all I ever asked God for, and it's happening. And said, no, that's not the Christian tradition. That's not the spirit of Jesus. He said, you start in Jerusalem, but then Judea, and then Samaria, and then the uttermost parts of the world. It's not good enough to just have the pillar of fire by day and the cloud, or the pillar of fire by night and the cloud by day over your roof in your church. It's where isn't God moving that he could be moving if you would get behind it, if you would support it, if you would come alongside and help. Something like that. But you need to think apart, because it should be something that doesn't benefit your ministry, that you give to, that you sacrifice for. See, when Ken Gates went up north, he left the good ministries of Edmonton. Central Tabernacle was a great church then in 1949. But he said, I want to go as far as the Mackenzie Highway goes, wherever that is. And that happened to be Hay River. And he hitched a ride from Peace River in a logging truck and got there. And he went to the cafe and had supper. And they said, so what are you here for? He's 21 years old. He said, what are you here for? He said, I came to start a church. And the fellow who owned the cafe says, we don't need a church. And he went around the table. There's 12 people at the table. And they said, do you think we need a church here? No. Do you think we need a church here? No. Got around to the last one and says, we don't need a church here, and you should go back home to mama. What they told Ken Gates. Wouldn't sell him a lot to build a church on in the town. He's living in a thin-walled trailer. It's 40 below outside, 40 below inside. He wakes up at night and he's throwing a bit of kindling into a tin heater to keep warm, and people not working with him. It's hard. He's out of money. Central Tabernacle said, we'll send you $25 a month if we've got it. He had $50 in his pocket when he went up there, but then he spent the $50, and he's out of money. And what are we going to do? But he meets a carpenter who says, if you will keep the fire going in my shack and have some kind of a meal ready at night, you can eat supper with me. And Ken said, I can keep living. He wasn't going to starve. And he just kept on and on and on until not only the church in Hay River, but churches throughout the north, preaching points, beginning of the hospital, and the whole sweeping over that region of faithfulness over 31 years. But he had to think of something apart from Edmonton. We didn't need another Central Tabernacle up in Northwest Territories. We needed a hospital in Hay River that would open up the hearts of Northerners to the gospel. And he had to start a scout group before he could start a Sunday school. And he had to think apart from what he was used to thinking. And what I'm wanting to challenge you, especially those of you whose church has begun to grow, because we're gusting up towards 40% of our churches growing now. And I want to challenge you that the way of God is to not be enamored by your success. And we have some very successful churches in this district right now. Not to be enamored by your success, but to say, what can we give to that is struggling and that is not like us? And as we invest in it, probably nothing will roll back in the way of benefit or blessing or growth for our church. So I'm saying to you, I met Daniel Jackson. I think he's back in the back there. Hi, Daniel. I'm saying that as a church that is starting to grow now, we need to start thinking other. And we need to say, you city churches need to start thinking about rural churches. Rural churches, you need to get a line in your budget to supporting indigenous works like Daniel. He drives 2 hours before the service on Sunday, 3 minivan trips to pick up 30 kids, cram them into his minivan to get them there. And then he has service, and then he spends 2 hours, 3 trips, driving them back to where they live. And that's third world poverty situations. Is never going to be self-supporting. When are we going to start writing these things in our budget so that he doesn't have to live on buttons and he can carry this work out? We've got university chaplains, a fellow who just resigned, and others that I know that struggle. When will rural churches say, we're not city, and we don't have any young people that are going to university anymore? When will you start writing a small amount into your budget every month to support our university chaplains and our Mission Canada workers that are always going to be in ministry situations that will never be self-funding. When will the churches in the South realize that the whole of the Northwest Territories, except for maybe a few areas where tithers have good enough job to support their churches, but that we need to invest in that? And it's a part and other from what we are. It's so different from our church, and what we give there will never benefit our urban metro churches. It will never benefit these fine southern communities. We need to start giving to the north. We need to start helping that come back again. And in other ways, our international missions, Murray is here with us today, and that was a hallmark of what this movement was when in 1918 it began to go. They gathered so that they could have some commonality and perspectives on the Holy Spirit, but they also wanted to fund world missions together. And they just started small back alley churches, started giving to international missions, and we became a very significant mission sending organization. But early on, not once we get the building paid off, not once we have the extra staff members, not once we get all the programs and the success lined up in our current operation that we want. But while we're still struggling for all our life, we need to risk everything on giving and investing to things that are apart from and other what we're like, that will help them along. That's just the Christian way. That's Jesus' way. But we need to act. And I felt we needed to say this now because I think by this time next year, more than half of our churches are going to be prevailing, and it's going to continue for another 2 or 3 years after that. And it will have the appearances of success. And I don't want that. I don't want them to say, look at the Alberta Northwest Territories District. I want us, by acts of generosity and investment in the broader kingdom, to already now begin giving to what is not us and what is apart from us and what is other than our own identity. And that, I think, is germane to God's continued smile of favor on us. I did this when I was pastoring in Edmonton, and I look back to the days when there were breaks in our line graph, when we gave hugely and sacrificially to things that really impacted us, but that had no particular increase in growth in our church. But we gave to rural churches. We gave to united churches. We gave, if they were Bible-believing, Christ-honoring, and they wanted to do outreach, we made an investment in them. We gave to Anglican churches. We gave to rural churches. And we made huge sacrificial investment in them. And I tell you, the favor of God came upon that place, and it continues to this day. And I don't say we should give so that we're going to get money back. That's not it. I just think if we don't do this, we are less than what Jesus would have us be as we begin to recover. When I started, we had 18% prevailing churches here. That's experiencing incremental growth. We were the lowest in the nation. And now we're the highest in the nation. We're 37% that are growing. And I say that's the time that we need to remember that we have to start investing in other areas that are not experiencing some of the success that we have. We have to become a servant to others. And it's for that reason I want to bring this before you. And this completely is a hijack. You're given no warning. And you'd say, I want to be more deliberate and intentional and thoughtful about this. And if you take that approach, I totally understand, and it's fine. But we're going to put a map up here in a little bit of Canada. And I'd like you to think about it, pray about it, maybe talk with your team and say, where should we, where could we be giving out from and away from ourselves in a way that will not benefit us directly at all, as far as we know, that we could invest in with great elation and faith, where the gospel could prevail if we stood with them? Where could we give till it hurts to invest in kingdom expansion? And it could be international missions, it could be in I think Gary Connor's here. It could be in Quebec. It could be urban, reaching to rural. It could be monolithic cultural in the cities reaching to indigenous. It could be whatever. And it just depends what God says to you in your knower. There's no right answer to this. It could be the university chaplains. It could be whatever. It could be the church down the way, and you're blowing things out of the water, and they're just struggling for all they're worth. We'll send a youth team over there, or who send a day camp team up to Ozell Borden and Fort Resolution. Say, we'll run 2 weeks of day camp for you. That'll just blow people's socks off. We'll come. It's not going to cost a penny. We'll come up. We'll fund it, and then we'll come up next year. I look forward to the time when there will be waiting lists for you to be able to send a day camp team to the north. There's just too many want to go. Too many youth groups want to go and help them in outreach in places where we don't even have churches. I hope that Daniel says, look, you're the fourth call I've had this week. Please call someone else. I've got more than enough money to do all the native ministry I can do on the Alexis Reserve. I just don't need you, but you're too late. Call somebody else. That sounds silly, I know, but I believe we have the capacity to do this. I think God can help us to do this. And the joy of giving and the blessing of Christ-heartedness is going to overtake us. And I don't know what it's going to result in. I really don't know. We want to see 80% of our churches prevailing. I know that. But what we're going to become, what we could do, what we could help. But I'm saying, will you dream with me? I mean, I'm old. You're probably going to have to carry a lot of this on without me, you know. But as long as I'm healthy, I'm willing to have a go. And I'm saying, God, strengthen us. Give us great vision. And let's rear back and hit this thing with faith and obedience for all we're worth. That's what I want to share with you tonight. And we're going to bring the map up, and there's going to be some music. And if God doesn't say anything to you, then leave it be. But if God speaks in your heart and you're saying, give to them, give that much, I'd like you to just identify and put your church name on, you can abbreviate it. It's not that we need to know anything about who put it there. It's more for your record than our record. And we just want you to, in a faith declaration, say, there's a place in southern Alberta, there's a place in the Arctic, there's a place in Quebec, there's a place somewhere where out of our abundance and out of our success, maybe even out of our poverty, as Paul said once, he said, out of your great poverty you gave, whatever it is, I want to challenge you to come up and just put a little mark on there that is just your mark. It's like the illiterate person that has to sign with an X. I don't care what you put. And there's going to be many things there. You may have to draw a line down to where it is. You can sign up on the top and just draw a line down to that part of Canada. And if it's in another part of the world, just draw an arrow headed that way. And say, I know what that means. Nobody else knows what it means. It doesn't matter. And seriously think, God, as good as you are being to us, we want to think more than me. We want to open Jerusalem, to Judea, to Samaria, the uttermost parts of the world. Would you do that? We're going to sing, we're going to pray, and may God seal this up in our hearts. If it makes sense to you, good. If not, there's going to be food later on. God bless you, and you'll enjoy that. So let's pray that God will speak to us and do something outside of ourselves, beyond ourselves, bigger than ourselves, and believe that God has something very exciting in store for this district. Amen. God bless you. Thank you.